Welcome to another oral history interview brought to you by the Stanley County Historical Society. I'm Darrell Longman from Norwood, and today's interview is with Les Young of Norwood. It was 60 years ago this month that President John Kennedy established the Peace Corps. Over the last 6 decades, nearly 250,000 Americans have served as Peace Corps volunteers in more than 140 countries. Some of these volunteers have come from Stanley County. Today's guest is among them. Les Young's country of service was Ecuador, which is located astride the equator on the Pacific coast of South America. Young's 2-year Peace Corps tour began with a 9-week training program at Springfield College in Massachusetts, followed by a month-long outward bound experience in Puerto Rico. That was during the summer of 1963. Thank you, Les, for sharing your Peace Corps experiences with us today.
Well, it's my pleasure being here, Darrell, and to participate in this interview series. And I want to thank the Stanley County Historical Society and Judge Susan Taylor, the chairman of the Education Committee, and you, Darrell, for this opportunity.
Let's start with the origins of the Peace Corps. Tell us how the Peace Corps was established and how it was organized.
Well, the Peace Corps will always be associated with President John Kennedy. But the original idea was not from him. Others within the government and outside of the government had been thinking of establishing something like Peace Corps for some time. Even when he mentioned the Peace Corps during the campaign of his presidential campaign of 1960, he did not have any firm idea of how the Peace Corps would be organized. Though he mentioned it on several occasions, and the response was very favorable. Following one late evening discussion with a number of students at the University of Michigan, and their response was so favorable, he told an aide, "I think I hit the winning number." Sergeant Shriver, his brother-in-law, reported in a book that he wrote, "The Point of the Lance," that throughout the period from the election day until inauguration, the new administration received more letters in favor of, or people wishing to participate in the Peace Corps, than all other agencies of the government combined. 30,000 letters came in during that period. 2 days or so after the inauguration, President Kennedy asked Shriver, put together how this Peace Corps can be organized, and then I want you to organize it. So Shriver got busy, and with a few aides, and they worked night and day throughout that February of 1961 to come up with a structure of how the Peace Corps would function. And they presented it to the president at the end of that month, recommending its immediate implementation. The first day of March 1961, President Kennedy created the Peace Corps with an executive order, but at the same time asking Congress to pass a Peace Corps bill, which would permanently establish and fund adequately the operations. They did. They passed a bill in September, and but before that, it was sort of a pilot project, and two of these groups were in the field in Africa, and teachers in Ghana and road surveyors in Tanganyika by September the 1st, even before the bill passed. So to get it passed, Shriver did not just leave it up to Congress. He and his right-hand man, Bill Moyers, who had come over to help him from the vice president's office, they lobbied Congress from April through September, and he reported, Shriver did, that they met with 363 congressmen to explain to them about the Peace Corps, answer their questions, and ask for their vote.
Well, let's move on to your personal Peace Corps experience. You were an athlete during high school and college. I'm assuming that's why you were selected from Ecuador for a coaching type position in the Corps.
Well, I think so too, because in my application I did not say what I wanted to do. I did say that I would like to go to Latin America, and Ecuador is a wonderful place. I'm so glad that I was asked to go there. But they were a Peace Corps training group for coaches, physical education instructors, YMCA staff members. Were going to be trained that summer at Springfield College in Massachusetts. And I was one of 43 trainees who accepted the invitation to go through that training program. 12 of us were scheduled, or plan was for us to go to Ecuador, and the balance to Venezuela.
Well, tell us about the training that you underwent.
Well, we had rigorous training. Started classes at 8 o'clock in the morning. Went to lunchtime. Back to classes at 1:30 till about 5. And then after dinner at night, we had a period, 2 hours sometimes, of conversational Spanish among ourselves in small groups. And then on Saturday, we went to class from 8 in the morning until lunchtime. The morning started, the day started with 2 hours of Spanish. And we were in small groups, 8 or 9 students per class. And then we went on, after that, the second half of the morning was in training about the culture and history, and environment, and the people of the countries we were going to be serving in, host countries, Ecuador and Venezuela. And a good bit about Latin America in general, and about the United States' involvement with Latin American governments throughout the years, some of which was not very flattering to us. Then in the afternoons, we had classes in health, public health, personal health, a variety of other sort of issues I don't recall necessarily at the moment, but by mid-afternoon we were in our specialty training, and for us we were specialists in sports and athletics and physical education. So we spent from 2:30 until 5 in class or on the playing field, dealing with several dozen sports. And most of us knew 1 or 2 sports, very well.
Right.
Didn't need much training in those, but the training we got was helpful. For instance, in swimming, spent a lot of time with swimming, and we weren't taught how to teach someone to swim. That was not the goal. We were taught how to teach a swimmer to be more competitive. And of course, I couldn't do that. I was never going to be teaching swimming, coaching swimming, but you never know. Mm-hmm. I may have been found myself in that situation. I have to do it. We also had some classes in group activities, which I enjoyed very much. That were age appropriate and indoor, outdoor events, depending on the weather. One thing I was kind of surprised at, but then when I thought of it, soon realized it was the teacher was instructor was right on target. The instructor told us that when you're having a group activity going and everybody's having a great time, that's time to stop and start something else. And then he went on to say, because if you let it go until the folks aren't having a good time, you've probably lost their attention and enthusiasm, and it'd be hard to recover. And I found that to be helpful over the years.
Les, you spoke about the Spanish. Clearly that was a very important part of your training. How did you get along with that?
Oh my, feebly. My foreign language experience until that time was very thin. 2 years of French in high school, and I had no interest in learning to speak French or learning to read or write it. Just wanted to pass. And then in college, I was at NC State, and most of the students at State were not required to study a foreign language. Engineers, agricultural students, we weren't required it, so I didn't do it. So when I got to Springfield with no experience, I was of course put in the lowest class, and of the 8 or 9 of us in that class, it's pretty clear I was next to the last. That other poor soul, I felt sorry for him, but I felt sorry for myself also. And so our training had started from the beginning, with the teacher, and then at evenings when we were supposed to be in conversational Spanish, those in my class, we just sat back and listened. And it was rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat. We didn't know what we were hearing. It was pretty terrible. Such that the professors, thought that I would never learn to speak Spanish adequately. Therefore, it's not advisable to send him to Ecuador. So that was where I sat, and I kept worrying all throughout the 8 9 weeks. Are they going to send me home a failure? And I knew the possibility was equal, probably at least 50-50, that would happen.
From there you went on to Puerto Rico, I believe, for some advanced training.
Yes, we were scheduled to go to Puerto Rico, but the way this works is that at that time, no one was a Peace Corps volunteer until they finished the training. You were a trainee. You couldn't call yourself a volunteer. And there was a selection officer, one person, at least in our training program. His name was Dr. Webb. He was hired just to handle the selection. We saw him at the opening banquet. He spoke to us. And nobody ever saw him again on campus until the end of the day before it was over. And they had selection day. He came and held a conference with the instructors and the staff, and they reviewed the portfolio of each student, each trainee, to decide, is it practical to send this person abroad in this program? Maybe language is a problem, maybe something else is a problem, but did not want to send people abroad that were going to have problems. Rather stop it early. And but they didn't know really how to do this too well. But Dr. Webb was a dean at the University of Florida of the School of Psychology. And I talked to him by email years later. Found out that he worked in the Second World War as a student in psychology, a graduate student, when the war broke out. And he worked in a program for selecting and deselecting pilots, navigators. And they had to come up with a way, how do you evaluate someone? Anyway, he told us that first night at the banquet, and I think he was telling the staff, as much as the volunteers, that I am the one who will decide who becomes a volunteer and who does not. So I felt pretty good about that. I'd rather have him judging me than these teachers, Spanish instructors. Anyway, we were out on the track that day, going through the stations of high jump and pole vault and passing the baton all around. And they called in one or two people to go to the conference. They hadn't called me yet, but then they called me. Fearfully, I walked over to the conference room, and they led me into this building, tall building, narrow building, long brick walls, and very few windows. And Dr. Webb, sitting at the far end of the room, had to walk through all of this. On either side were the professors and the staff. Might have been some other people there from Washington, Peace Corps. When I got up and stood before him, didn't have a chair for me. He said to him, I'm going to say he said Mr. Young, I'm not sure how he addressed it, but Mr. Young said, a lot of these folks say you'll never make it down there, you can't learn Spanish. And don't want to send you. But otherwise, they think you're kind of volunteer we want. So I'm going to give you this choice. You can leave here today and go straight to Jamaica where they speak English and be a Peace Corps volunteer in Jamaica. Or if you prefer, you can go with your group to Puerto Rico, go through that month-long program, and then we'll revisit your situation after that and decide where you'll go. I told them right away, I want to go with my group. I was confident when I got to Ecuador, where nobody spoke English, I had to speak Spanish, that I would do it. He said, very well, that's what we'll do. So off to Puerto Rico we went and had a wonderful experience, outward-bound experience. Unfortunately, I don't think we have time today to discuss details of that. But at the end of the month period, they called us in and handed each of us a travel folder. And it were our airline tickets from San Juan to Miami. And then from Miami on, and then had a hotel voucher for that night in Miami. And so everybody's looking at it, and I looked to see if mine said Jamaica, if it said Ecuador. I looked at it, Ecuador. So they never talked to me again about my language, though it hadn't improved very much. But they saw I could get along with folks, even with the limited Spanish I had. I guess that's what happened. So we spent the night. Next morning we met with Mr. Pines, who was our area director, and they call him Peace Corps representative. He's the one that had put together the program in the first place. And we flew to Guayaquil, Ecuador with him. And during the flight, he called us up one by one to sit with him to get acquainted and to learn more about us. He had a brochure, little folders on us. And he was trying to place us, 12 of us, in positions that had been pre-established, predetermined. We won't volunteer to do this location. But he had to put the pieces together. And Now, as we got to Guayaquil, there were 3 people that came out on the tarmac to meet the plane. And they were from the Comisión de Béisbol, La Comisión de Béisbol. They came to meet their baseball coaches. Turns out I was the only one of the 12 that played baseball beyond Little League level.
Mm-hmm.
So Mr. Pines called me over and said, Les, you're going to be working with these guys here in Guayaquil. He'd wanted to send me somewhere else to monitor. And so, about coaches, Ecuador had asked for this program. The Peace Corps did not send anybody as policy. That's one of the Shriver's early on rules. You don't send anybody anywhere unless they're asked for by that country. And early on, right after he had been assigned the job by President Kennedy, he went to 8 countries in Africa and Asia that had already said they would like to know more about the Peace Corps and be interested. All of them signed on. All of them said, you know, what you're proposing to bring middle level manpower here, we want to be part of that. Anyway, the people decided if they wanted road builders, road surveyors, or if they wanted teachers, or if they wanted nurses, if they wanted somebody to work in electricity or credit unions. Well, Mr. Pines I visited him many, many years later. He lived outside of Washington, D.C. He told me that the only time he was ever summoned to the office of the governor of Guayas Province, that's where Guayaquil is, the biggest in the state. He went there and the governor said, listen, Mr. Pines, I want you to bring us some coaches. And don't tell me you can't do it either. Because I know for a fact there are Peace Corps coaches in the Dominican Republic. So Mr. Pines said he went back and got busy writing up a program description and sent it to Washington, and they approved it. And that's how this particular sports program got arranged. It was requested. So.
Well, tell us about your living arrangements while you.
Okay.
Let's tell us about your living arrangements while you were in Guayaquil.
Okay. Well, to start with, they put us in a pension, and the name pension, that doesn't seem like it. Sounds like a hotel. It's a pension is a place you can go to stay. And I was in a room with 4 people, bedroom, sleeping room, 4 different beds, you know, a bathroom down the hall, nice restaurant, a cafeteria, a restaurant, like a school cafeteria. That's where they put us, and stayed there until we got assigned. Most of the volunteers, trained, were now volunteers. Most of them were going elsewhere, 6, 7 other cities in the country. But I was staying there, along with several others. And I was assigned to a particular neighborhood. And after a few weeks, with the help of the folks, 2 girls that lived in that neighborhood and worked there, we found an apartment I could rent. But you could stay in a home with someone, rent a room there, or you could have a small apartment. 2 Peace Corps volunteers could live together in a small apartment. So, and we ate. I didn't do much cooking. Lived, you know, my roommate wasn't there. He'd gotten sick, but I moved into the apartment. He'd been sick and was recuperating elsewhere. So I didn't do any cooking much. Made a sandwich maybe, but would eat out in the restaurants. And
were the other coaches assigned to Guayaquil while you were there?
Yes. We had a female swimming coach. She'd been a swimmer at Stanford University. And we had a track and field coach. And Dan Roble was a basketball coach from Michigan State. and we'll call him Danielle from now on, that's what he's called there. He was assigned to live in Barrio Cuba. It's Cuba. It's Barrio Cuba. And he'd been requested by the Anglican Church, the two priests, two rectors there. There were some children, boys who dropped out of school, like third graders to eighth graders, seventh graders, and hanging around the street corners wasn't good to do, and the church, in the church neighborhood. And they thought getting a Peace Corps volunteer to come there and had a place at the church he could live, in the loft, maybe he'd be a good influence on these boys. So he went there, and I went into the neighborhood with Las Peñas, that's the lower section, but on the hillside is Cerro de Santana. I was assigned there, and it was the oldest district in the city. And its church dates from the year 1548. So this is early on in the settlement of America. So anyway, we weren't sports exclusively. Our work was done in sports exclusively. We were expected to find things to do in our neighborhood or in the city somehow, other jobs to fill in all the rest of the week when we weren't coaching. And a community building was going to, community center was going to be built in our neighborhood, Barrio. And the idea is I was going to help with that construction, the supervision, design, and so forth. And Dan, down the 20 minutes away on the bus drive, had those boys out there in this street corner to work with. After a few days of being around there, and they knew who he was, and our pictures were in the paper on the sports page and so forth. Didn't take them long to know who we were. And he approached the boys and said, you know, I've got the keys over here to this business. It had a cement wall around it as a warehouse on the river, the dock. And they had a basketball court and a volleyball court. I got the keys over there and said, we can go over there and play basketball anytime you want to. Yeah, good. Mm. So he got the boys over there playing. But after a short while, next day maybe, he said, you know, I think what we ought to do is, why don't we go to school? We got some classrooms over the church. We go to school one day and then play ball the next. Yeah, that'd be good. And one of the boys said, well, no, why don't we go to school every day and then play ball afterwards? And that's what they did. And Dan, of course, at night we'd run at each other at restaurants and so forth, and talking about that, and bragging about it. I had everything going on like that, and I was getting kind of envious of him. And but then the next day or so, he said, Les, I want you to come help me teach. He was going to teach reading and writing and spelling and public speaking, which is a big deal down there. Everybody could, we don't teach public speaking here in school anymore. Most of everything's written. But any Ecuadorian can stand up on a soapbox and can tell you what's going on. And that I was going to teach arithmetic and some geography and some simple science, things I could do with my very limited Spanish. And then after all that was over, at 1 o'clock, we'd have lunch with the rectors at the rectory. Wonderful meals all the time. And that went on, for some while. One day I was working with the boys on numbers and to read out the numbers, and went through all of, and none of them had any problem with numbers where there was 1 or 2 or 3 digits, like 7 or 70 or 707. All of them got that. But then when we got to a bigger number, I've got one right here for you to look at. It became more difficult to pronounce, say. But we went through one by one, and brought them up, and I was at the blackboard writing different numbers, writing them. And everybody was able to master it until we got to little Jacinto, who was about 5th grader. And Jacinto was a smart boy. Wasn't nothing slow about Jacinto. In fact, he wasn't very patient. He got up there and started reading, Rapideo, and messed it up. Started again, and messed it up again. Well, anyway, what I didn't tell you is, in the midst of all of this class, our boss, Mr. Pines, came into church, into the classroom, and took a seat at the back of the class. So he was watching all this, and he was worried about my Spanish, I know. And here I was with Jacinto, and I wanted to tell him to slow down, be patient, think it through, and the Spanish words didn't come to me. I thought I knew the right word, but it just wouldn't come to my tongue. And as little Jacinto was getting more and more troubled with all of this, and I think everybody else in the class was too, certainly I and Mr. Pines, the word came. And I said, "Más despacio, Jacinto, más despacio." And he smiled and leaned back a little bit, got his composure, went back to it, and read out, 707,077. Que bueno. He'd mastered that. How wonderful. Now, I don't know who was the most happy, Jacinto or me or Mr. Pines, but we all were elated, and I think all the students were as well. It's certainly a red letter day for me. I knew after that Mr. Pines was not going to send me home because I couldn't communicate.
That's a great story, Les. You talked like it only happened yesterday.
Well, you don't forget something that is something like that. You know, I was invested in that, and so that's the way it was.
Now about coaching baseball, I know you helped them train high school players and who were members of adult teams, but seldom got to play. Susan Taylor made reference to a story about coaching from Ecuador baseball, which is published in Gaither the Fruit by One, 50 Years of Amazing Peace Corps Stories.
You want me to read a little bit from that?
Yeah, it'd be great.
Well, here's the book. And it's published 10 years ago when the Peace Corps turned 50. Now it's turned 60. It's the 60th anniversary from March of 1961 to today, 10 years later. And the people who put this together, they put 4 books together. One is a collection of stories from South America, one from Africa, one from Asia, one from the islands, Polynesia and East Asia. And they asked for submissions, and I submitted this story, and they published it. And I've got it. I'm going to read just parts of it. By April, the rainy season is over in Ecuador, and children are in school again. Soon the baseball season will begin, and La Comisión de Baseball appears serious about reviving youth baseball in Guayaquil, the country's largest city. To my surprise, they secure uniforms and equipment for 4 teams, ages 14 and younger. El Universo and Radio Cristal promote the new Liga Infantil, and on a beautiful Saturday morning, the left field bleachers are filled with boys eager to play. There are men present that I don't know, some of whom played baseball in Guayaquil during the earlier era. After a brief tryout period, La Comisión de Baseball selects the teams and announces the coaches. I'm stunned to learn that I'm not among them. What's going on? Am I not the best baseball coach in Ecuador? El Universo suggests as much in article after article. Compounding my confusion, no one in the stadium speaks English except me, and my Spanish fluency is narrow. Motioning to center field, Senor Saenz, the president of La Comisión de Baseball, gathers the boys not selected and says to me, "Let's take these boys out there to play." Now I get it. They want me to coach the boys no one else wants. Senor Saenz calls to the stadium keeper, "Juan, where are the balls and bats Enrique brought yesterday?" "In the clubhouse, boss." "Bueno, bring them here." We walk to deep center field and Juan arrives with the balls and bats. They're homemade. Short bats turned from lightweight wood and hand-stitched balls soft enough to catch barehanded. Perfect for these boys who have never touched a baseball before. One more time. I show them how to throw the ball overhanded, catch with their hands formed like a basket, and hold and swing the bat properly. Fly balls require more attention. I develop a technique for catching them. Palms up, hands touching, fingers spread apart, and I demonstrate over and again. As the ball arrives, lower your hands and body, and bend your knees, reducing the chance the ball will bounce out of your grasp. There were no gloves. The 8 young boys pay close attention and learn quickly, and I begin to experience what wondrous feeling a teacher gets when a student masters a subject hitherto a mystery. When the practice is over, I ask, "Do you want to play again next Saturday?" "Si, si," they reply. Delighted with their enthusiasm, I say, "Then bring a friend with you. It takes more players than this for a game." As the first game is played, the other 2 teams watch patiently. These boys remind me of a childhood disappointment of my own. One day I overheard some of my older friends discussing a tryout for a ball team. 4th graders were not invited. I was too young, but that didn't deter me. I went there anyway, mitt and mask in hand. I knew I could play ball as well as any 5th or 6th grade boy, better than most. To my disappointment, I didn't get to try out. With tears in my eyes, I walked home from the ballpark that Saturday morning. My parents must have noticed. The following season, there was a 3-team league in our little 2-stoplight town, and I played second base for the Reds. The next Saturday, I'm thrilled to find 30 boys waiting for me at the stadium, enough for 4 teams. The weather is beautiful, not a cloud in the sky. It's this way from April until mid-December. Year after year, perfect baseball weather. Guayaquil is a bustling port. It's located just 2 degrees south of the equator and 50 miles upriver from the Pacific. Farther east, but not visible from Guayaquil, the Andes dominate the landscape with brilliant snow-covered peaks. We practiced for a while, and then I lined the boys up height by height and counted off by 4s, hoping that this will yield a relatively even strength teams. They each take names. As I point the tallest boy on each team as El Capitan for the day, and he assigns positions to his teammates. Each week new captains will be named, extending the privilege eventually to all. To further simplify game day organization, a prefix batting order is established. First baseman always bats first, second baseman second, shortstop third, and so forth. As the first game is played, the other 2 teams watch patiently, waiting their turn. I know I must do the pitching. Let the batter swing until he hits the ball. No strikeouts, no walks. For smaller boys, I pitch from closer up. I pitch underhanded when needed until a batter can hit an overhanded pitch. Another rule I decided to break concerns substitutions. Everyone on the team is in the batting order, and everyone plays in the field. If a child comes to play, he gets to play. Some boys hit the ball immediately. Others have trouble getting their bat on the ball. Miguel is among the latter. After a series of missed swings, I notice a frown. I approach Miguel and say, try to see the ball bounce off of your bat. It's impossible to do. No one can do it. Yet, longer you watch the ball, the better chance you have of hitting it solidly. Do you understand? See, Miguel replies. He swings again and comes closer to the ball. Bien, I say. That's better, but swing harder and keep your eye on the ball. Miguel connects with the next pitch, racing to first base. His teammates cheering and jumping up and down. Safe. A smile as bright as Ecuadorian sunshine appears on his face, and on mine too. Que bueno, I roar, loud enough to be heard throughout the park.
Reading into that deeper into the story, one learns that new players keep arriving weekly, and you keep forming new teams into the season with 14 teams in your league. Sure, there are other stories you could tell us, but time does not permit that today. Less in closing, is there anything more you would like to say about the Peace Corps?
Yes, Daryl. I was one of the first Peace Corps volunteers, and we had certain ways of operating. Over time, there were changes made. For instance, we trained at a U.S. college. Some years later, training was taken offshore, and the trainees would go to the country they were going to serve in and have training there, and they'd live with a family, and where they could learn more about the culture and language. Changes occur. Teachers initially were needed, particularly in Africa, in large numbers. But today teachers aren't as essential. They have teachers of their own. And new areas are coming up, like public health today, certainly, and the environment. What I was doing then might be called youth development now. That wouldn't be exactly with sports, but it'd be somehow working with the youth. So changes are made. Nothing stays stable, stagnant in any organization indefinitely. So that's what I want to say. Now today, the Peace Corps is far different than it was 2 years ago. We all were surprised when the pandemic came, COVID-19. And at first we didn't think too much of it for a few weeks, but sometime up in the spring, all of a sudden the world realized, this thing is deadly. And within about 3 or 4 days, all the Peace Corps volunteers in the world, and all the Peace Corps staff, doctors, administrators, were evacuated and brought back to the United States. So today there are no Peace Corps volunteers or staff anywhere outside the United States. And we don't know what the future of the Peace Corps will be. If it'll go back the same way it was before, unlikely it would be identical, I would think. But it'll be around in some form. I feel comfortable that will happen. But I know President Kennedy and Sergeant Shriver, the director of the Peace Corps, and the others that put it together, the congressmen who put it together, many of them, they had a dream or an idea that the Peace Corps volunteers would go away for 2 years and return and be of service to the local communities and to our country. And the Peace Corps, former Peace Corps volunteers, or all the Peace Corps volunteers, are still living and able, are doing that today, wherever they live. And that's one of the benefits the Peace Corps provides to our country.
Before closing, I want you to point out your Pleo pen I've been looking at, and I hear there's a story that goes with that pen.
Yes, Sergeant Shriver and his wife, the President's sister, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, decided to give to each Peace Corps volunteer who had served during his tenure, 5-year tenure as Director of the Peace Corps, a gift. And they commissioned Tiffany to design and produce this pen. And it came to me in the mail one day, in this little box. And it's easy to keep and not lose. And thank goodness that I hadn't lost this like I have so many other things. And it's the most treasured pen I have. And I wear it on occasions such as today. Now, Sergeant Shriver resigned as Peace Corps Director after 5 years, and of course people were disappointed when they heard that. But he and the others that structured the Peace Corps, they arranged it so that volunteers worked for 2 years. And then the staff at a maximum of 5 years. The idea being, you don't want to get too stale. Want opportunities for somebody else to come in and do it. If you're going to do this for a lifetime, then you know it doesn't have the spirit that temporary work does. So by his departing at the end of 5 years, it set this policy a little deeper into the system, and allows new faces to appear and become part of the Peace Corps family.
Well, that's something to thank you for your interview today with the oral history and your 60th anniversary of President Kennedy's Peace Corps.
Thank you so much.